Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're delighted to have you back with us today. As I said before, happy, healthy new year to everyone. Hard to believe it's 2022. The year is underway. We hope that you're all healthy and staying safe. As you know, this is our continuing Margin and Mission Ignition Labinar series, and today is Labinar number 3, which we've titled, Do You Think Your Nonprofit's Ready for Earned Income? Important Success Factors to Consider Before Jumping In. We want you to get a few things out of our session today, which we've outlined here. And as you know, the focus of these sessions is to continue to get insight into earned income and social enterprise. So as part of our continuing Labinar series, we absolutely want you to continue to explore entrepreneurial possibilities for your organization. We also want you to continue to apply tools and rigor and thinking to your organization as you're looking to identify your most viable earned income opportunities. And then thirdly, today, we're going to introduce a few different lenses for you to think about your own organization's preparedness or readiness to succeed at earned income. And I think, as most of you have heard us say, it's one thing to explore earned income possibilities. It's another thing to really dive into a venture and know that your organization is poised for success. So those are a few goals for today. And please, as we're going through today's session, jot down notes. If there's things that you want to ask us as we go, feel free to do that. And of course, if we can't get to that today, you can follow up with us afterwards. So we do have an action-packed agenda, as we always do. We're going to start with just a very short recap from Labinar number 2, just to remind those of you who were with us at that session what we did. And if we have any newbies here today, just to give you a little bit of an overview. And then we're going to dive into these topics related to how do you know if you're prepared to succeed at earned income? And essentially, there's 4 of those that we want to talk about. One is, we want you to continue to further vet your earned income possibilities. So we'll talk about that. Secondly, this idea of, if you have an earned income venture, how might you fund it to generate some startup or growth capital? And we believe that it's never too early to begin thinking about that. Thirdly, communication. So what are you telling your various stakeholders about your potential earned income venture, or perhaps an existing one, that they need to know? And then the last thing we're going to talk about, which is also very important, is what we call Lwrcc. You've heard us refer to it before: leadership, willingness, readiness, capacity, and culture. And we'll talk in quite a bit of depth about that. And then, as we always do, we will share some next steps with you. So stay with us to the end, because those next steps are always important. We do encourage you, if you would like to get connected. Again, if you have a nugget of information or something that you would like to share on social media, these are our Twitter handles, our hashtags. And of course, if you'd like to follow us on Facebook and haven't done so already, we would certainly appreciate that. Okay. No session would be a session unless we gave you a few Zoom housekeeping items. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Michael Zimmerman, a fellow at the Patterson Foundation, just to share those. Michael, are you there?
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Michael. Michael Zimmerman here from the Patterson Foundation. A few housekeeping items to keep in mind. Please remain muted as we continue the Labinar and throughout the duration of the Labinar. Also, if you could kindly rename yourself with your first name and the name of your organization. And then also, if you could just put in the box all the other names of anyone from your organization that's in the room with us today, so we know who they are. And then, of course, please share comments and questions in the chat box below on the screen, and we will get to them as we go, as time permits in our Q&A. And now back to you, Mike Oxman.
All right, thank you. It's that time in our Labinar to show us your pearly whites, and also please feel free to turn your video on if it's off right now. And I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment and ask Josephine Eisenberg. Josephine, are you there?
I am here. Good morning, everyone.
She'll do her Zoom photo magic.
I'll give you a couple seconds to add your lipstick or fix your hair or stretch and get your face ready to smile. Turn your videos on if you are so inclined. I'm going to take 2 pictures. I'll tell you smile and hold and then relax. And then again, as Michael Zimmerman said, if you have more than one person in the room with you sharing your Zoom space today, if you'll add both those names so that we can see all of you guys who are participating in the room. So sometimes we just see the one name, but I don't get to mark down that more than one person is with you. Okay, ready? Everybody have a smile and hold and relax. Let me do it again. One more time, smile and hold. Perfect. All right, great to see everyone today.
Okay, thank you, Josephine. And thanks to all of you for another Zoom photo. These photos do show up in the craziest places, so we'll show you how we use the last one in just a moment. Just a reminder, you've seen this in all of our Labinars. We remind you once again, our must-dos are please continue to open your minds. That's a good thing, a great benefit of these Labinars because they do encourage you to explore possibilities. Hopefully you'll learn something new, and you will likely reinforce things that you already know. And as we always say, earned income is fun. So we hope that everybody will have a little fun today. I think by now, most of you have met us, but if we have any newbies in the room today, I'm Mike Oxman, managing partner, one of the managing partners and principals at No Margin, No Mission. And my partner in crime, who's waving up there, want to say hello, Mr. Clark.
Good morning, everybody. Larry Clark, the other managing partner.
Larry zooming in from beautiful Tacoma, Washington today, where it's cold and snowy. Also, for those of you who haven't met our colleagues at the Patterson Foundation, they are certainly a motley crew, and we're delighted to partner with them. Deborah Jacobs, who's not with us in the session today, but certainly sends her regards. You may see a tweet pop up at some point during the session from her. Michael Corley, Senior Consultant for Administration at TPF, Connor LaGrange, who is one of our fellows, Michael Zimmerman, who you met, and Josephine Eisenberg, for whom, without her initiative support, we would certainly not all be here today. So thank you, as always, to our colleagues at the Patterson Foundation. As a reminder, this Labinar series is a gift from the Patterson Foundation to all of you, and it includes a total of 4 90-minute Labinars, of which each one is designed to address a specific topic on earned income, as well as 2 mini Zoom consulting sessions. You've already been through one of them, and there's going to be another one after today's Labinar. So those are one-on-one sessions with both Larry and myself to really dive into, focus, and discuss your earned income possibilities. And for those of you who fully participate in this Labinar series and have a desire to get something more, the Patterson Foundation will be offering that something more, which essentially is a process that you can go through to be considered for advancement to a more intensive consulting phase of this initiative, which would include us working with you to help develop a business plan for your earned income venture. We would then work with you to help implement your business plan and bring it to life. And then it would also include a period of time, which we call post-implementation tracking and monitoring, where we would stay with you to help ensure that your earned income venture is in fact meeting your goals and staying on track for success. So more to come on that, in particular during our next Labinar, Labinar number 4. So you'll definitely want to stay tuned for that. Okay, you know that each of these Labinars includes a number of Zoom poll questions because we do like to hear from each of you. So I'm going to ask Josephine if she can bring up our first Zoom poll.
Here we go. Everybody see it okay? Yes? Okay, great. Thinking about your organization's number 1 earned income possibility, how would you describe it? Feel free to just click on the one that resonates with you. It's an existing product service that we want to move from free to fee. We're currently selling the product or service, but want to grow and expand. It's a product that we haven't yet created, but we want to develop and launch it. And let me get back to you on that. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to let the last few people click on. And here we go. What do you think, Mike?
Okay, well, we've got most of you in those middle 2 responses. Either we're currently selling the product or service, but we want to expand and grow it. So that's great. Or it's a product or service that we haven't yet created, but we want to develop, launch, and sell it. Both of those are great responses and great places to be. For the 3 of you who have an existing product or service that you want to move from free to fee, excellent. And for the, let me get back to you on that, that's okay too. Remember, this is all about exploration and looking at possibilities. So we don't expect you to necessarily know exactly where you've landed yet. Okay, well, let's keep moving. Bear with me while I pull the poll off the screen and we'll go on to the next slide. So Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk through a little bit of a flashback.
Let's just take a minute or two and go through the work we did. So that you'll, as Mike said, here you are. Hopefully you see yourself on one of these little pictures there. Part of what we did was we really pushed you to think about possibilities. And even on the calls that we had with you after our first Labinar, we were brainstorming, and you're still brainstorming some of those possibilities and things that you might dive into. And as Thomas Edison said, when you have exhausted it all, you really haven't. We spent time looking at these 3 organizations, and a couple of them have actually reached out to us and said, you've reached out to them, which we really appreciate. And that means you're interested, you're asking questions, you want to know how they did. It was a good process to go through for all of you, we believe, to listen how they made decisions and how they move forward and kind of where they're at today. And all of them, Mike, if you want to change the slide, all of them met LWRCC. So leadership, willingness, readiness, capacity, and culture, all of them fit in each one of these categories and passed with flying colors. So we're going to dive into this today, focus on it, the latter part of our Labinar here, and you can look internally at yourself at that point. So our next poll question, Josephine.
Again, here we go. Thinking about your earned income progress since Labinar 2, what has transpired in your organization? We significantly advanced our thinking and action. We made some progress, but know there's more to do. We didn't move the needle much at all, or there were too many competing priorities and no time to think about it. And just to remind you guys, this should just be as honest as possible, and it's anonymous. We never, there's no way for us to know who's answering which question. Not that that matters, we're all family. Couple more seconds for you guys to click on the one that resonates with you. And here we go.
All right. Well, we're really happy to see that you made some progress, most of you. and that you understand that there's more to do, especially if you move into business planning. Some of you significantly advanced your thinking, and we love that. And some of you are still trying to figure it out, and we get that also. So thank you for taking that poll and giving us some indication of where you're all currently at. Mike.
Okay, so let's dive into the topic at hand today, which is how do you continue to narrow the focus by assessing, vetting your earned income possibilities in a way that allows you to think through a number of the important components of it. So, as you know, following Labinar number 2 and during your worksheets, you guys were asked to think about 6 criteria and to sort of give a gut check on how you thought your earned income possibilities did against each of those 6 criteria. Well, what we want to encourage you today to do is to move beyond the gut check and look at those 6 criteria that we have and ask yourselves, how do you know it? So looking for some ways to really substantiate and even validate the how do you know it. So let's start with the first of those 6 criteria, the is there market need and demand. Now, when you think about need and demand, you should be thinking about, is there a clearly identifiable source of business for your product or service that you're going to be selling? So the kinds of things you could think about would be, for example, do you currently get calls or inquiries or people who might be reaching out to you to say, I'm interested in buying this? Have you looked at the marketplace? Are there competitive offerings out there that perhaps have significant need and demand? Those are 2 ways that you could look at to help validate the is there market need and demand. And remember, don't just assume that if you build it, they will come, because as we know, that frequently does not happen. You want to be able to both show and or prove to yourselves and your team that in fact there is market need and demand out there for the product or service that you're thinking about bringing to market or that you're thinking about expanding and growing. So again, in the worksheet number 1 that you're going to have as follow-up today, you'll have an opportunity to show how you know there's market need and demand. Okay. So the second validation criteria, very importantly, is, are there customers who have money to purchase what you're going to be selling? So, of course, if there's nobody with money to purchase it, it's going to be hard to have a viable business. So again, how do you know it? So if you have never been through this exercise other than to do a gut check, really try to get a sense for what the market looks like, what spending in the category looks like. Perhaps that there is a funding stream of some sort that agencies or organizations who are in your target market may have to purchase what you're selling. For example, if you have a curriculum of some sort that you're selling to schools, it would be very helpful to know, do schools in the region have some sort of funding coming down that could be potentially allocated to or spent for the product that you're going to be selling? So again, go beyond the gut to say, oh yeah, we know there's folks out there who have dollars to purchase it, and get creative in figuring out the ways that you can either prove or show how do you know it. Okay, so that'll be the second part of worksheet number 2. Operational ease. So when we talk about operational ease, we ask you to think about, is there simplicity in the development and delivery of the product or service that you're going to be offering. What will it take to get this venture off the ground? Have you really sat down or thought about identifying the steps and what's needed? So again, we all know there are businesses, there are ventures that are crazy operationally complex, and there are those that are much more simple, and then there are those that are somewhere in between. We would hope that yours would be somewhere in the simple to perhaps somewhere in between. So again, is there operational ease? How do you know it? You'll be able to think about and show that on the worksheet. Speed to market. So after you've identified kind of the steps and the process that you'll go through to either launch or grow your earned income venture, really think about how long would it take to get this up and running. So is it 3 to 6 months? Is it 6 to 12 months? Is it a year, or is it 3 years? And the idea here is that it's perfectly fine to have an earned income venture that's on the shorter end or the longer end of that continuum. But when it comes to this initiative, the work that we're doing, we would always encourage you to look for an earned income venture that you can get to market more quickly, that doesn't get so bogged down in a long timeline that perhaps you and or others lose the interest, lose the wherewithal to move it forward in an efficient and effective way. So again, depending on whether you have an existing earned income venture that you're going to take to the next level, or you're creating something from scratch, be thinking about kind of how quickly you could get it to market. You'll have an opportunity to think about that again in the worksheet. So mission contribution, you will always hear us talk about how does your earned income venture align with the mission of your organization? And importantly, for the work that we do, we would always encourage you to focus on an earned income venture that is aligned with your mission and will help propel it forward. So if your earned income venture is aligned with the mission of your organization, it will have mission impact, and that's a good thing. So the how do you know it test is really looking at your earned income possibilities and saying and articulating how is it aligned with our mission. And then the last of our 6 criteria that we really, again, would like you to think about and address the how do you know it is the margin contribution. So after expenses, how likely is it that your earned income venture would generate a profit or a revenue surplus? And we will acknowledge that this can be the toughest of all of these criteria to really prove and show how do you know it. But there are some things that you can be thinking about, looking at, and even considering within your own organization. Things like, do you currently track expenses for your staff time? Do you currently track expenses by project or program or service? Because that can help you get a very good handle on expenses. And also, are you tracking either revenue or dollars that are coming in against products, programs, and services? So again, remember, revenue less expense will help you get a good handle on that. And also another thing to think about is, have you thought about or tried to rough out any sort of pro forma budget, just to begin the process of understanding some various scenarios for purposes of either an existing earned income venture or one that you might be thinking about. So that's just a few ideas or ways that you can think about the how do you know it for margin contribution. Okay, so those are those 6 vetting criteria. Again, you've already started that in the worksheet that you did following Lab 2 with the gut check. Now we're going to ask you to go back, do it again, and really look at the how do you know it. So continuing with that theme, let's introduce our next poll, Josephine. And this is a good question for each of you to address.
Okay, here we are. Thinking about your organization's #1 earned income possibility. Which assessment criteria below do you know the least about? There's market and need and demand. There are customers with dollars to buy. It can be developed or launched with operational ease. It can be developed or launched quickly. It will contribute meaningful mission impact, or it will contribute a meaningful level of margin. I'll give you a couple seconds to keep clicking. These are great questions to get you guys thinking about your earned income possibility. It's fun to watch the numbers rise. Okay, one more second. And here we go. Looks like 2 are almost tied, Mike.
Yeah, so you gravitated toward the middle. It can be developed or launched with operational ease, and then also to the margin contribution one, which again, frequently we will see this when we ask groups this very question. So you're not unique in that regard. And then we've got a few others that are that have said market need and demand. It can be developed or launched quickly. And then I think we've got one who said there's customers with dollars to purchase it. So again, I think the key here is that those of the 6 vetting criteria, the ones that you know the least about are the ones that you're probably going to want to dive into and spend the most time thinking about and looking at, trying to understand better. What we'd like to do is, as part of this discussion, let us just open it up and ask if anybody has any questions or would like to talk about one of these particular areas in these 6 vetting criteria. I'm going to stop my screen share just for a minute and give folks an opportunity to either ask a question or comment if you'd like to do so. Anybody want to raise their hand and ask or share? Or is there something in the chat box, Connor, that we should address?
Yeah, Mike, there's 2 questions. One Larry already responded to, but it might be good to talk out loud to everyone, which is, what do you consider a quick speed to market? And then the second is, what is considered a meaningful level of margin? So
I guess when we talk about quick speed to market, we typically, at least within the framework of this initiative, is we'd like it to be under a year, ideally in the sort of 6-month range, if it's possible. And by that, we mean, we don't mean that you have to fully have your product or program or service 100% up and running, but it could be launching it, soft launching it, even piloting it, kind of with all the components that your business venture would have. So it's when we get beyond the year into a year plus, 2 years, 3 years, that we say that's okay, but within the context of this initiative, it's probably too far out for us to keep it moving with efficiency and effectiveness. And so I don't know if that was the question, Larry, that you had answered, or if it was the other one.
Good response, Mike. Good response, Mike. I said 6 to 9 months, so that's good. You didn't contradict me, so I feel good about that.
Larry, do you want to address the margin question?
Sure. So Stephen asked, what's considered a meaningful level of margin? And honestly, it depends on the type of business that you're running. If you're running a food distribution kind of business, the margins might be smaller. If you're running a different kind of business, we would expect something larger. We would love to see 30, 40, 50% margin that you would gain over time. And it might take a couple of years to get there, but that would be a goal that we would have within the business planning process. So, and again, but it really just depends on what product and service you're offering. So Not a really clear answer, Stephen, but hopefully 30, 40, 50%.
Other questions, comments, thoughts? Anybody want to chime in? Okay. Anything else in the chat box, Connor? Otherwise, we'll move on.
No.
Nope, you're all
Okay.
good.
All right. Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to continue into the next of our success criteria for an earned income venture.
So like Mike said, this is another success factor. So funding your venture, it's never too early to think about that. And, you know, depending on if it's something brand new that you're getting up and running, or if it's something that you already have in place that you need some additional capital for, that's what we're going to talk about now. So what might you need that startup or growth capital for? You know, again, it depends on the size of your agency, the product or the service that you're planning to take to market or to expand in the market. But a lot of times we see staffing or marketing and communications, there might be some capital expenses. You might have to buy something, some technology or some other type of equipment. There might be some software you need. You might have to rent a space or cover cost in a space that you're already in. So that startup or growth capital, which would be a part of the business plan, you would hopefully raise that in the beginning, and you be able to bring that staff on to produce that marketing, to, you know, cover those capital expenses right off the bat. So where might those dollars come from? So there's a lot of places that the organizations we work with access those funds. You know, primarily the first one is from donors. So you have a donor base out there that already probably gives you some resources. Those might be folks that would provide some funds for your startup capital. You might get a grant. We've had nonprofits that get grants. There might be an investor, more like that angel investor, where they're kind of, you know, a gray area with a donor, but they might want to invest in you more from a mission impact investment. It might be crowdfunding. You know, we've had organizations that do crowdfunding, and they do a Facebook post, and, you know, lots of people are giving small amounts of money. Could be a business plan competition. There's a few of those, and we'll provide an example. You might get a loan. We don't necessarily suggest that, but it is an option that if you need some startup capital. Or we have a lot of organizations that have some resources set aside and they self-fund. So I'm working with a group right now that's self-funding their startup capital. And there's others beyond this list. So let's give you some thoughts of organizations that we've worked with and how they raise their startup capital.
So this is an organization called Age Options. It happens to be one of the area agencies on aging, or AAAs in Chicago. And we help them develop and launch a product, an offering called Advisory. And essentially what Advisory is a tool, a set of services and consulting that helps consumers. It also helps providers better navigate the complex Medicare and Medicaid systems, which can be, you know, pretty daunting for folks. So they created a whole series of trainings and consulting around that. As we went through the business plan and helped them develop it for Advisory, they had about $150,000 in startup capital that they had to raise. And so the way they actually raised those funds was, as a board, they decided they had money set aside within their own operating budget and they were going to self-fund it. So I would say, while that happens periodically, it does not happen often. Self-funding does not happen often. I will say, and it's important to note, that we do have organizations that we work with who will decide to self-fund a portion of their startup or growth capital. So for example, if $150,000 in capital was needed, their board might agree to allocate $5,000 or $10,000 to contribute to that, because it will show other potential funders and donors and investors that they have skin in the game and are willing to commit a portion of their own resources to it. So that's self-funding. Larry.
So another is Habitat for Humanity in Charlotte County. We've done a couple of projects with them. The first one we did was clean out and removal. They were getting calls from people who were moving and they just wanted to get rid of all their stuff. They were moving into a retirement facility, or maybe somebody passed away and the family just wanted the house cleaned out. So they created a clean out and removal business. They needed about 60,000 in startup capital to go for marketing, for some staffing, some advertising. They wanted to print some things. Majority of that was going into staffing initially, and they raised it from donors. They had individual donors out there that provided the startup capital funds. And in fact, they generated more than their 60,000 during that startup fundraising time. So we felt good about that, but they went above their $60,000 mark, but they got it from donors.
Oops.
The next organization received a grant. This is a group that we worked with here on the West Coast in Washington State called Courage 360 Reach Plus, and they created a curriculum for women that were getting back into the workforce, coming out of incarceration or coming out of some substance abuse issues. And they needed some startup capital. They had about $45,000 that they needed to raise. And they actually approached a funder in our area, and that funder provided them the $45,000 in startup capital that they needed to do the development of the curriculum. So they got that in a grant, which would be a fallback. We would rather use your donors providing those funds, but getting a grant is another option.
So we talked about crowdfunding. Larry mentioned that just a moment ago, and the Lighthouse Vision Loss Education Center here in Sarasota did that to help raise startup capital for Peepers, which is their store, both an online store and a brick and mortar store that sells merchandise to help people who have low vision, and with an emphasis on electronic magnifiers. So the way they did their startup capital raising process was to actually craft a very powerful appeal letter to send to their donors that was specifically addressed on Peepers, but in ways that told powerful stories about how people who bought items, low vision items from the store, actually had their, I guess in many ways, their life changed, their life become better because of what they purchased at Peepers. And it was interesting because in this appeal letter, they made it very clear that they were asking their donors to contribute in whatever way they could or could afford to, whether that was writing a check for $10 or $25 or $50 or $100 or $500. And because the organizations that we worked with had never done anything like this, we weren't sure how it was going to work, but it actually worked beautifully. They got lots and lots of small checks that came in, and they ended up raising $80,000 in startup capital as a result of this sort of crowdfunding approach. So again, another way to think about raising startup or growth capital. Another organization that we worked with is called the Tampa Bay Healthcare Collaborative. And just in our own backyard, their mission is to promote and advance health equity to those who are negatively affected by unfair barriers to having their best health possible. And they created, as part of their business plan, cultural competency trainings to help health and human service organizations, along with consulting that they offered as well. So what was interesting about this group is, again, they did this in a little bit of a non-traditional way. they applied to be a part of a business plan competition through SVP, Social Venture Partners. Some of you may have heard of SVP. They have affiliates in different cities across the country. So they applied for it. They actually had to do a pitch, and they were one of the winners, and ultimately got I think it was a $15,000 award to help them with their startup or growth capital. So that is another way that organizations can generate some startup or growth capital. It's helpful for each of you, if this is one of the routes that you would like to take, is to actually go online and do a scan or a search of business plan competitions, because there are several of them across the country, and they can be again just another way to generate some capital. Okay, so we've got a poll question for you related to funding. So Josephine, do you want to bring that one up?
Here we go. Thinking about your organization's #1 earned income possibility, which method of raising startup growth capital do you think would generate the most funding? Donations, grants, pitching investors, crowdfunding approach, entering a business plan competition, securing a bank loan, or using dollars from your organization and self-funding? Great questions again. Looks like so far applying for one or more grants would be folks' idea of how to generate the most funding. No one seems to want to secure a bank loan. I can't understand why. Give you a couple more seconds. Looks like a few more people can still answer. No bank loan takers yet still. Okay, here we go. Looks like grants is the winner and no bank loans for today, Mike.
Okay, yes, 15 people. So almost half of you said applying for one or more grants, certainly an option. And then I think in second place was seeking donations, or as we like to call them, mission impact investments. They stand for the one and the same, but certainly good, viable ways to generate some startup or growth capital. Larry, back to you.
Yeah, so let's talk about the startup funding just a bit more. And this is on a worksheet. So we want you as your team to really sit down and think through this, because we have found that it's better to start those conversations now with potential donors, that you're interested in this, kind of get them included in the conversation a bit as you're making decisions, than to wait until the very end and spring it on them. So think about who could provide those funds to you? How would the funds be acquired? When would you start those conversations? When would they begin? And we think sooner than later. Who would start those conversations on your staff or your board? You know, sometimes it just depends, who knows who. And then, you know, thinking about whatever that donation is, wherever it's coming from, are there any strings attached? And we like the dollars to come in that don't have a lot of strings attached. Sometimes grants have strings attached, as you know. So think about that on the worksheet. Sit down as a team and think through this. And I think right now, Mike, if you want to flip to the next, let's talk about it just a little bit. You know, do you have any questions about raising startup capital or growth capital? Do you have any thoughts about it? Anyone like to share? Questions?
Or also, are there any, is there anything we missed in terms of other ways that you could think about raising your startup or growth capital?
Right.
And of course, your creativity here is always a good thing.
Anybody want to raise their hand? Have a question?
If I could ask, maybe Kara Morgan over at Venice Main Street. Hi, Kara.
Hi.
when you were at Historic Spanish Point, I know you went through a process to raise some startup or growth capital, something
Yeah.
that we didn't talk about. Anything that you're willing to share there?
That was traditional fundraising, and we had a number of donors that participated. It was quite a few years ago, so I don't recall exactly like how many donors offered up funds for our new program. But for those of you who haven't heard about what Spanish Point's program was when they did the MMI project, it was a wedding venue rental company or wedding venue rental business venture. And so the project included a new staff person, site improvements, and a few other things to enhance the product. And I think our overall investment was about $85,000.
Yeah, and well, Kara, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that we love is something called a fast pitch. And a fast pitch is essentially like our version of Shark Tank. So we invite the organizations that have gone through the business planning process to get up in front of their potential donors and investors and funders and pitch their business plan and make an ask. Oh, we need $80,000. Here's why we're asking you to, open up your checkbooks and contribute to that. And we give them, just like Shark Tank, we give them some very strict parameters in order to do that. So that might be another opportunity to raise.
I think one last comment before we move on is some of you might be thinking, wow, we can't go back to our donors because we really need them to contribute to our operating budget this year. And we don't want that to usurp that check that we'll get from them. What we have found is that 99% of those donors are so excited to see a business plan that you're doing something creative that will generate revenue that they're willing to give you more money. So we see them provide you dollars for the startup and they do their annual contribution alike. So don't be too concerned about that going into this, about where that startup capital or not getting the donor base that you'll get on your annual appeal. So Mike, shall we move on?
Let me just ask Connor, anything in the chat box that you want to flag for us before we move on?
Oh, not so far. Oh, well, will you talk more about the fast pitch later? That just came in, perfect time.
Yes, we will.
We will talk more about the fast pitch during the Labinar 4. So yes, stay tuned. Okay, we'll keep moving. So another important earned income success factor, and we are huge believers in this, is communication. And I guess, from our perspective, it is critical to keep your various stakeholders informed about your earned income venture while you're planning for it. So not necessarily waiting until you have it ready to launch, to engage folks, but bringing them along with you as you go. And so that means more than just communicating with prospective donors and funders and investors. So let's talk about that. Why is it important to communicate about earned income within your organization? Well, there are so many benefits for organizations that communicate about earned income, which include, one, it gives you the ability to educate and inform people. So that's an important benefit in and of itself, because if you assume people know and understand, they likely will not. So the more that you're sharing to bring other folks along with you, the better. Secondly, as you're doing that, communication can actually help you build support. And importantly, as I think many of us have learned over time, that when you bring people along with you and have them nodding their head, yes, 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 then it creates just an easier and more efficient and more effective process for you as you're getting ready to launch or grow your earned income venture. Thirdly, by sharing, communicating, it does build transparency, so which in turn eliminates any mystery around what it is you're doing. And in the end, as I said, it really does result in more efficiency and greater effectiveness for your team, for your organization, as it relates to your earned income venture. So let me share a couple of examples in terms of organizations that we've worked with and their communication as they went through this process. So one of our clients is called Generation Schools Network. They're an organization that has a model for schools, high schools in particular, that essentially changes the way teachers teach and students learn. So they've got this model that they actually sell to school districts and they train them around with consulting. And that was what we helped them do, was to develop a business plan for that. Well, I just want to start by saying a big part of this organization's DNA is to communicate, 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 communicate. So, this whole idea of over communicating is definitely where this agency falls. And as they were going through this earned income process, they did a number of things that, from our perspective, were very positive. So one is they involved their board throughout the entire process in their earned income discussions and planning. I can't tell you how many conversations that even Larry and I participated in with their leadership team and board to really keep them engaged in understanding and feeling a part of the process. That helps tremendously with board buy-in and support as you go through this process. They addressed questions about their earned income venture on an ongoing basis. They didn't wait. They made sure that if there were questions, they were getting any challenges or pushback, that those were all addressed as they went, so that it wouldn't become an ongoing issue. They actually made personal calls, or I should say the executive director and some of the board members made personal calls to their funders to let them know what they were up to. Because remember, oftentimes funders, because they're partners with your organizations, they want to know, they like to understand how you're contributing, how you're looking to build kind of the sustainability of your organization long-term beyond just acquiring grants and donations. This topic was on their agenda for every staff and board meeting. They just made it a part of every staff or board meeting. And whether that was a significant part of the agenda or a smaller part of the agenda, it was always there. And as I said before, Larry and I, No Margin, No Mission, participated in a number of board presentations. So we give this one the thumbs up, the smiley face, great job. And this is a good model for you and your teams to follow as you move forward. On the flip side, here's an organization who shall remain nameless. We're not naming names with this one, but they get a big thumbs down / sad face. And not surprisingly, unlike Generation Schools, whose DNA was to over communicate, this organization's DNA was kind of to under communicate to a point where it was really to a fault. So what did they do, or should I say, what did they not do in terms of their communication for their earned income venture? Well, very little communication with their board. They took this attitude, this approach that, we're only going to share with our board on a need to know basis, okay? There are organizations, there are teams like that. We don't encourage that at all, especially when it comes to an earned income venture. Also, their board was not present at key sessions that, for example, were facilitated as part of their earned income discovery, business planning, and even other components of the work that they were doing. And then also, the board was just absent from discussions, period, about planning. And there were really almost no updates on progress that was taking place within the organization as it related to this earned income venture. And of course, all of those things sort of dovetailed and worked against this organization. So even though they went through a whole process to plan for an earned income venture, what ended up happening is they didn't have board buy-in, they didn't have agreement, they had a lot of issues related to lack of communication, and it resulted in what was a mid to an endpoint series of challenges, pushback, disagreement, and ultimately this organization's board pulled the plug on their earned income venture. So not a good scenario. We certainly do not encourage this approach. Now, in terms of communication, we've got another poll question we want to introduce. So Josephine.
Here we go. How would you describe your organization's communication activities related to earned income during the Labinar series? We've covered our bases. We've had conversations with board, staff, donors, volunteers, and key stakeholders. We've shared with staff and board, but no one else. Not too many people know yet. And then it's a well-kept secret. We haven't talked to anyone yet. That's a great question. I love that these questions continue to have you guys think inward about what you actually been doing. Couple more seconds. A few more people can answer. And here we go. Looks like most of them have shared with the staff and board, but no one else yet.
That's good. You know, again, we understand that we're still early in this process. We're only into our third Labinar. We certainly don't expect that you've done all these things, but we're happy to at least hear that you've taken steps to communicate, and that's a good thing. Ideally, if you move forward with your earned income venture, you will continue to communicate, hopefully over communicate, and keep folks involved in and understanding what you're up to. So, you know, again, fortunately, there aren't too many of you who said it was a well-kept secret and you haven't shared it with anybody yet. And I guess to that group, you know, as you move forward, we hope that you will, we would encourage you to share and communicate. Okay, so again, because we want to make sure that you take some time to think about communication and how you and your team would approach it, worksheet number 3 will allow you to think about and address that. So who are you keeping informed about and engaged in this work? Whether it's your board and staff and donors and volunteers and partners and potential customers, clients, and others would be a good thing. And if it's all of them, that's certainly a very good thing as well. And then importantly, not just who are you keeping informed and communicating with, but how are you keeping them informed and engaged in this work? So as we shared with you during those 2 examples we gave, you know, are you putting an update into your board meetings and on the agenda? When you do staff and volunteer meetings, is there some sort of update that you can include in that? Also, with board and staff, you can also engage them, ask them to contribute. You know, maybe there's some brainstorming opportunities, so they do feel like they have an opportunity to be a part of it. Are you keeping potential funders and donors informed? Are you doing any sort of outreach to engage them? It could even be a survey of some sort. Are you doing any email updates? And of course, there could be a number of other ways that you are keeping stakeholders engaged in, informed about, and understanding the work that you're up to. So again, you'll have opportunity to do this as part of your homework. Okay, Larry, back to you.
So moving on with those important success factors, we want to dive into Lwrcc. So leadership, willingness, readiness, capacity, and culture. This is really kind of looking inside, kind of pointing the fingers inside your organization right now and saying, do we have those success factors in place to ensure that we can move forward? And if there's one thing that Mike and I and the rest of the Patterson Foundation staff have learned over the years is if you're missing one of these or two of these, it's really difficult to move forward. So again, LWRCC, we're going to dive into each one of those categories right now. And why don't we start with leadership? So leadership, thinking about the executive director and your board, is the executive director committed to this? Are they engaged in earned income? Do you have a champion, either in the executive director or another leadership position on staff? Is there a champion that really is into this and will move it forward? Is your full board on board? You might have only communicated with a few board members now, but it's really important that your entire board is backing or helping move your earned income idea forward or your venture. And is the executive team, in it for the long haul if you have an executive team? Because it's not something that's a project that will be done in 6 months. This is something that will take a while to get off the ground, a lot of commitment and a lot of time. So again, leadership is really, really important as you move this forward. Mike?
Larry, if I can interject for 1 second, one of the things too that we just encourage you to think about as part of leadership, LWRCC, is what's happening with your own organization in terms of your executive director, CEO. For example, is there a planned transition that is in the works in the coming year? Is your executive director or CEO going to be transitioning out of the organization and is somebody new coming in potentially? If that's the case, that's really something you need to think about, because we have learned, I should say, that an organization that is getting ready to launch or grow an existing or new earned income initiative, if their executive director or CEO is transitioning out, it oftentimes will challenge the success of that earned income venture. So again, something to really think about is within your own organization, is that a possibility? Same thing with, is your board chair transitioning out and somebody new coming in, and how vested are they in this earned income venture? Okay, let's move on to the second one of LWRCC, which is willingness. So when we talk about willingness, we want you to think about a series. Are you getting an echo?
That was interesting.
Okay, I think it's gone. So we want you to think about a series of questions here related to willingness. So number one, is there a strong desire and enthusiasm for earned income within your organization and team? So we're at this point, we're making the assumption that there is, because you all are here, you're participating in Labinar number 3, which is a good sign. Is there a shared belief and understanding of earned income within your organization? So thinking through in terms of your staff, your volunteers, your donors, your board, and other key stakeholders. So this is that sort of part of this is that communication piece we just talked about. How have you educated and shared within your own organization this whole idea of your earned income venture? Thirdly, are there passionate advocates for earned income? That's all. There will be some. And then another thing is there a green light within your organization for earned income, and also an agreement to overcome barriers? So an important consideration to think about, if the green light is everybody hearing that?
Yeah, it's the person with the cell phone. I don't know who you are, but it keeps providing feedback. So I keep muting you.
Okay. Uh, Again, this idea of having that green light for earned income is a great thing. If you're sensing that there's a yellow light, that sort of proceed with caution, that's something that you have to think about, work on, and help address. And if there's a red light, within the organization that would indicate stop, that's definitely an indication that you want to take some serious action to address it. RJ, I see you have your hand up. Did you have a question you wanted to ask? You're on mute. No. Okay. We are going to open it up for some discussion in a few minutes, so you can hold your thought. Okay, so that is willingness. You'll have an opportunity to address that one in your worksheet as well. Readiness, an important one. So things that you need to think about in terms of readiness for earned income. One is the organization prepared to take action. And that's very important to us. There's this idea of talk versus action. And we are huge believers that it's great to talk, it's great to think, it's great to brainstorm, but you also have to be prepared to take action when it comes to an earned income venture. So an important consideration. Secondly, is the organization driving toward thrivability? So you've heard us, use this word thrivability before, but again, this forward movement toward thrivability and really thinking about both the mission and the financial thrivability of your organization. So both of those should be something that you believe the organization is moving toward or in that direction. Also, we talk about as part of readiness is does the organization have stability? And that's important because, again, when we talk about stability, stability is defined as having continuity, that you're able to continue with regularity and predictability. So if you're finding that your organization is in more of a survival mode and that there is instability or uncertainty or chaos, that does not bode well for an earned income venture. So again, we urge you to really think about and understand that as it relates to your organization. And then the other part of readiness is your organization pretty good at planning and execution? Planning and execution, because when it comes to an earned income venture, when it comes to business planning, it is important that you be able to develop that plan, that roadmap, and then equally or even more important is being able to execute that and bring it to life. So if your organization has a history of not being able to either plan or execute well, that could be challenging for you in terms of an earned income venture. Okay, so that's readiness.
The next one is capacity. So looking inside your agency, do you have some available resources, whether it be some funding or staff time or volunteer time to actually put into this venture? Do you have the capacity to do that? Are there some funds available? Do you think that there's funds available outside the agency that will help fund this? Is there that capacity in your current donor base? And really important, are there any strategic partners or alliances that you could leverage for earned income? Do you have capacity there? We find that capacity is a really big factor here, that if you're worried about your salaries next week or next month, if you're having some capacity issues, even doing fundraising right now to keep the doors open, it's a problem, as you know, for all your other programs, let alone trying to do something new that you haven't done before or that you want to grow. So capacity is really important to take a really good hard look at yourself. Do we have the capacity to engage in earned income? And the last one, are you moving, Mike? Is culture. So what type of culture do you have? Are you entrepreneurial as an organization? Do you have that spirit where somebody comes up with an idea and people can run with it? Do you see opportunities where others don't? Or do you just, it's business as usual on a regular basis? So think about that entrepreneurial spirit and those opportunities. Is there openness to change? Or is it, no, we always do things this way, so that's how we're going to do it in the future? Is the organization nimble and flexible? Or does it take 6 months to make a decision and forever to turn a ship to create change in your agency? And do you take some calculated risks? Do you venture into maybe a new program or a new project? And do you have some history of doing that, where you can show that you've taken those calculated risks? So your culture is really important. Your culture and your staff, your culture of your volunteers, and also the culture of your board. Do you have that spirit that it will take, that excitement that it will take to move this forward? So culture, it's important. Let's move on to, I think, our final poll question. Josephine?
Yep, here we go. Thinking about your organization's LWRCC today, how would you describe it? We're strong in all 5 areas, prepared for earned income success. There's one area that definitely needs strengthening to improve our likelihood for earned income success. 2 or 3 areas that need work. I wish we could say we're ready, but we're just not. Again, these are anonymous, but so good for you guys to really consider the answers amongst your organizations.
That's great. There's a number of you at the top. And we understand, some of you are very small organizations, and so capacity is an issue, fundraising is an issue. So we understand why there's 2 or 3, areas where you're still trying to focus on. And some of you just have already realized you're not quite ready for this, and we acknowledge that. So thank you for doing this and giving us some indication of your readiness to move forward. So let's talk about it. Mike, do you want to open it up for a second? Do you have some questions about LWRCC or some focus for us? Any questions? I know that there was one question I think Ron had. Somebody want to raise their hand?
I think RJ, you had a question, right?
Yeah. So speaking of this, LWRCC, number one, I think it's just a phenomenal concept, and it's an approach that everybody should go through on almost every earned income, or even maybe sometimes non-earned income, right? Because we all have issues. Relevant to the capacity issue, it's probably the area that's the I guess most at risk, right? Because you do have people that move around, and if you have staffing and people that are committed, how do you manage the tenure, the long-term capacity requirement, for a project in a small organization where you don't have additional resources to throw capacity at it during a transition from one employee to the next employee?
Good question. I think, if we had the exact answer for you, that would be, kind of the $1 million answer. But I think there's a few things that Larry and I frequently will talk about that can help with capacity. One is, and RJ, you guys went through AMT, Advancing Mission Thrivability, and one of the things that we talked about in AMT is really having a good understanding of all the things that folks are doing, what you might be able to prioritize or reprioritize, either take off their plates, delegate to somebody else, so that you can then in turn make an initiative like this a priority. So that's one thing that we would always encourage you to do. But of course, we understand that, what if your team is fully tapped out and can't take on, another thing, and their capacity truly is stretched. So the hard truth is that if your team is stretched beyond capacity, it is probably not a good time to take on an earned income initiative, because it does require time, attention, and commitment for the long term. So it's not always maybe today. If you say your team is stretched to capacity today or tomorrow, it might just be that you have to say, oh, well, we're going to look then 6 months or a year down the road and aim to ensure that our capacity will allow us to take this on. So again, there are steps that you can take to address the capacity issue, but if you find that they're insurmountable, then we would say, you really have to back off from an initiative like this if you want to be successful at it.
I think another response to add to Mike's is, if you're already if it's a growth opportunity for you, if you already have that earned income and you want to focus on that, how much time are you currently spending on it now? And how much time of that is maybe being used in a way that could be more beneficial if you actually had a business plan in place? So it might be a bit harder to do the work in the beginning, but the long run, you'll have less time involved. So, it's that balance between capacity to do something brand new, or if you're already doing it, how much time are you currently spending? So, and capacity is a staffing issue or a volunteer issue. It's also a resources issue, a dollars issue.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Karen, do you want to take yourself off mute?
I did put this in the chat box because, I don't know how many other organizations are, how well developed they are, but there are maybe 6 people right now regularly that are on board and willing to work with us in all of this. So our earned income initiative, that what we'd like to focus on is something we already do, which is to put on plays, but to focus on doing touring shows and things like that, and be very specific about developing all of that. So my question is, how do you? I don't know. I'm just being thoughtful about all of the resources that. How would you bring this down to an organization that is still just very much growing, or has grown and experienced the pandemic and people leaving, and now we're on the upswing again? How would you tailor it for that? And we don't have, executive directors and staff and employees. So.
Well, I think, sometimes, Karen, especially in an organization like yours, you just need to take, and I hate to say baby steps, but it's really small steps where you might not be able to say, we're going to do this full-blown business plan and 12 people are going to be involved and we're going to create this whole new opportunity for us. But you might just have to take a piece of it and say, what are some ideas that we could think about for the future? You might have to start with a strategic plan if you don't have one, and say, maybe the organization needs that first to provide some direction to us to say, 3 years from now, where do we want to be? What might that look like? And then take a step back and say, what product or service might help us get there? But, you just like little baby steps, it might be the best response to that. Mike, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think, for small organizations, if you tend to be more grassroots in nature, just growing organically. So, as Larry said, baby steps will help the organization evolve and grow. But you certainly don't want to get in over your head or take on too much, because remember, that can actually work to can be a disservice and set you back. So, again, you're obviously very thoughtful, Karen, about this. And I know through my conversations with you during our first Zoom consulting session, we talked about that. But, it's just moving this forward in a way so that you can evolve and start to grow, but don't overwhelm. And I think, as part of that is focus is really staying as focused as you can on the work and the business and the mission at hand.
Okay.
Any other questions? Lori,
Go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
hi, I don't know who you are. I just called on Lori.
Right.
But go ahead.
All right. Well, because I didn't know, because I was driving and I'm listening, but I just want to say, this is Bill Neese and I'm with Rocket Phonics. That part of this process is the actual, and which I appreciate, is the evaluation as to really where you're at. And the system it creates clarity and honesty so that you can properly evaluate whether you're ready, so that you don't step into things that will actually stumble you, because there's nothing worse than starting something than actually finding it stumbles you, or puts you in a worse position.
Right.
And so that's why I mean, a lot of things that are being said is like how to evaluate yourself, see if you're ready, how quickly to move. And so I'm making positive comments to the process that you're laying out, so that it will better serve the organization's ability to be both ready and able to accomplish the task, rather than just kind of, oh, we got to do this because we need money or what, something, when it could actually cause more trouble than it would actually solve. That's my feeling about what and so I'm grateful for concepts here that are being put forward.
Great. We appreciate that. And think about LWRCC, and this is for everyone. You could take out the words earned income and put in any program that you're thinking about in the future, and how does it fit, and have that discussion. It really does work. Lori, do you have maybe the final question, and then we'll wrap up?
More of a comment than a question, but I want to piggyback off what Bill has said with the LWRCC, how helpful this information is, the categories, the questions that are asked in there, because like you just said, we can apply that to so many different areas and projects in our organizations. And I also love that you shared how to set us up for success, but also gave us the pitfalls of what other organizations have experienced that really didn't set them up for success. So thank you for that. It's not about the organization's name, but the information that you really shared about what they did wrong that didn't allow them to be successful in the end. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, it's not something that, it's something that we've learned also. And it's evolved over time. So we appreciate all the comments that you're sharing about LWRCC. So thank you for the questions. Mike, do you want to?
And I guess before we move on, LWRCC, just so everybody knows, is one of those tools that the Patterson Foundation applies to, I think, almost all of its initiatives. So as they look at initiative partners and organizations that they work with, they're always looking at and encouraging those organizations to think about LWRCC, whether it's for an earned income venture or anything else as it relates to the work that organizations do. So just a good thing to think about. All right, well, let's get ready to close our session. The point of today's Labinar has really been for you and your teams to continue to be thoughtful about your earned income possibilities, and also your agency's preparedness to succeed at earned income. So we do say, please consider all that you've learned about earned income, what's involved in an earned income venture, those readiness considerations, and what it takes to succeed. And then, of course, as you continue to think about and explore the possibilities and considerations, really be, I guess, forthright with your teams to say, well, do we have what it takes to move forward today or tomorrow, in the future? Are we unsure? So just being cognizant of kind of those various components. So in terms of some action steps, as we've said to you today, we do have homework for you. We've got 4 worksheets: furthering to further assess your possibilities. Worksheet 2 is to consider the startup and growth funding. The third one is to identify how you're going to communicate with stakeholders. And then the fourth one is to assess your preparedness through that Lwrcc. So we do want you to take action. We want you to join us for Labinar number 4. That'll be on Wednesday, February 9th from 10 to 11:30 Eastern. And during that session, the focus will be on developing an earned income business plan. And we know, again, through work that we've done for many, many years, that it is critical to your success for an earned income venture. And as Yogi Berra said, you know, if you don't know where you're going to end up someplace else. So thank you, Yogi Berra, for that good advice.
So part of the criteria is just as you've had to have, we'd like to have 3 team members attend, as you have in Labinars 1 through today, CEO, board, and a staff member, if you have all of those. Complete and submit. You'll get a follow-up survey. The worksheets will be sent out to you via email, the link to the worksheets. And some of you already have calls set up with Mike and I. We will reach out to you if you don't have a call set up, and we will set that up because we need to have that call prior to our next lab, and we need to get your worksheets first. So participate in that Zoom session, and we will confirm those with you. And register for Labinar 4. You'll get the link, the registration link, in a follow-up email. And as you need to register everyone on the team. So links you'll get. Today's recorded session, the PowerPoint slide deck in black and white that you can share with board members or others, follow-up survey, which we love to get your feedback, your worksheets, you'll have a link to those, and then you'll get the invitation to register for Labinar number 4, which we hopefully all of you will attend. And we would encourage you to invite others, maybe on your board, to attend this last one, since we are talking about business planning and next steps. I guess, and just to wrap it up, any final questions that any of you have before we say goodbye today? Any questions? Raise your hand. Hearing none, we really appreciate everyone spending their time today, looking inside your organizations mostly, and thinking about, are you ready for this, and moving forward. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We will be speaking to all of you between now and the next Labinar. So we'll say goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you and look forward to our continued conversations and work together.